Hey, it's Andrew Huang. In my time on Earth, I think I've probably heard thousands of demos and songs from people just getting into music production. I've had an online audience for quite a few years and lots of people just send me stuff. And then also I've started doing this online music production class, so I'm in there as often as I can be listening to students' work. By the way, the course is running again. You can sign up right now, learnmonthly.com/Andrew. So I've heard a lot of people's early work, and there are some things that I notice in like 95% of these tracks. Some things that just seem to be the things that beginners do. So I thought I'd talk about the top 3 things that I notice like this and just knock them all out in one video. I'm gonna demonstrate everything with a work in progress, a song of mine that you will have heard in the Subharmonicon video that I posted recently, if you watched to the end of that. But if you wanna skip it, you can just go to this time in the song, in the video. Otherwise, I think it'll be good to just be familiar with this music before we talk about these 3 mistakes and how to address them.
Stop, don't say it. We don't have to complicate it. Was it doubt we let in? Maybe we can just keep pretending. Even if I'm waiting in the coldest darkness, I'm never gonna shake it. I'm never gonna let you go.
By far the most common mistake that I hear a lot of beginner producers make is they put too much reverb on everything. And it's understandable, I've been there too. I feel like when you first start making music and playing with effects, reverb is a very common one that comes with almost every program, and it is such an easy way to transform any kind of dull, plain sound into something that feels really big and lush and special. And so everyone's natural inclination is to just use way too much of it, to put it on too many things, to use too extreme settings, and to have it too loud. If I've got a reverb on a track, I'll sometimes have it as low as 5% wet. I might go up to like 30 or 40 sometimes, maybe a little above that if it's like some ambient piece, but I'll definitely never go above 50. I feel like 50 to 99 is useless to me because it's just way more reverb than dry signal at that point. 100 is useful. I'll talk about that in a second. But if you're newer to producing, you probably want to have that dry wet lower than where you think you need it. That would be the first big change. The other 2 things that you should do with your reverb settings are probably have a slightly shorter tail than your first instinct might tell you, and also to have it slightly darker.
We don't have to complicate it. We don't have to complicate it. We don't have to complicate it.
Now I'm actually gonna delete this reverb completely off this track because I wanna show you sends. You should put your reverb most of the time on a send track. If you don't know what a send track is, you can basically send some audio to it so the original audio is still playing, but then on the send track, whatever effects you put on there, you can kind of adjust individually. For instance, you could put further effects on them, you could automate them independently of the original sound, and like I'm gonna show you here, one really good thing about having a reverb on a send is that you can duck it against the vocal. So on the send, you're gonna want your reverb to be 100% wet so that it's no dry signal, just the reverb. Here I'm using VALHALLA VintageVerb, probably my favorite reverb ever. Here's what it sounds like.
We don't have to complicate it.
Now, as you can hear, for the style of this song, I opted for actually quite a big, lush, long reverb, and that's what felt right to me, but I'm gonna keep that from clashing with my track by turning on this track spacer plugin. I love this thing. This is like a side chain, but only for certain frequencies. So when I'm sending the verse vocals to track spacer, it's going to turn down the frequencies of the reverb while I'm singing, based on the exact frequencies that are in my voice.
We don't have to complicate it.
Do you hear how when I'm singing, the reverb really turns down in volume, although it's only in the areas of the frequency spectrum that my voice occupies, you can still hear a bit of that higher end shimmer. And so that really helps to keep a mix clean because you still want that feeling of the big reverb, but you don't need to hear it really all like washed out when I'm actually singing the words. And then another thing I sometimes do is just have a normal sidechain compressor that's triggered by the kick. So the reverb is also ducking during the kicks.
We don't have to complicate it.
And then the last thing with reverb that I see a lot of beginners do is they just use one reverb for everything. Either they have one reverb on a send and they send everything to it, or they find one reverb preset that they like and they put it on almost all of their instruments. It's so important to dial in individual reverb settings for different elements of your song. You might send different amounts of them to the same reverb, or you might have entirely different reverbs for different instruments. So we were looking at my vocal verb here, but I've also got a verb on the snare. Got this mega verb, a room verb, a big verb. Don't even remember what those are on. A verb for the toms, verb for the gang vocals, and then also 2 different delay tracks because sometimes delay is great to use instead of or in conjunction with a reverb to kind of create a different sense of space. So it definitely takes a bit of time and finessing, but it's so worth it to use different kinds of reverbs on different parts of your songs to really create a vibe and create a sense of space that's not just like one cavern.
Don't wanna turn away.
In a lot of beginner productions, usually the vocals are mixed too quiet. Speaking from my own experience, and maybe this is true for some of you, I was not as confident in my voice or in my expression of my ideas when I was first starting recording stuff, so I would kind of hide the vocal behind the instruments, behind other things in the song that I felt like I was either better at or that sounded cooler. I would just really push my vocal down in the mix, and I hear a lot of people do this as well when they start out, and it is tricky to mix vocals. It's something that you definitely get better at the more you do it, and I find in a lot of tracks a difference of a decibel or half a decibel can even make a lot of difference. And so something that I'll do on a lot of tracks is throw on some kind of volume automation device. I don't like doing it on the actual track fader. I like to keep that free for mixing. But if we click here on my vocal, you can see I've done a bit of automation. Like this line happens when there's like a big impact sound. So it needed to be a bit louder to sit over top of everything that was happening. But by the time that impact fades away, I bring the vocal down. And it's got a very slight growth all the way through the verse because throughout the verse, all of the instruments are kind of building up.
Stop, don't say it. We don't have to complicate it.
So you can hear when I play it back there, it doesn't sound like the first line is a bunch louder than the second line, but it's because it has to compete with more in that moment. So ultimately that feels more natural to have them 2 decibels different. And this song isn't even complete yet. This is something I made in a day and a half for that Subharmonicon video that I dropped recently. So there might be even more finessing that I would do with this. In a lot of tracks, my vocal automation ends up being just a whole bunch of squiggles because you really want to get it right. And that's something that takes time, and it's something that you get better at with time. And finally, mistake number 3, and I would say this is the trickiest one to remedy, is parts being too static. When you're starting out, you'll be focusing a lot more on bigger ideas, on your writing and structure, and coming up with what your instruments are playing. And rightly so, those are very important foundational elements to any track, but the next step to that is to make those parts come alive, to have them be more dynamic than just playing the same thing all the way through a section, or even all the way through a song. I see a lot. Now, I said this is a tricky thing to remedy, and that's because, of course, it's really dependent on what your track needs. So I'll just rapid fire through a bunch of the things that I did in this track that I would say are different from how when I was starting out, I would just kind of like put my instruments down and be done with them. These are some additional finer detail changes that I made that really help the track come alive. So we've got this bass and chord part that are pretty consistent. They're actually the same in the verses and the choruses because the way I wrote this song, I just happened to use the same chord progression in both the verse and the chorus. As as I play these parts, you can hear they're constantly changing. They're always growing a little bit more in intensity. So on this bass, I've got the filter envelope growing and changing in different sections. On the subharmonicon part, as I was recording that, I was playing with the filter cutoff and the envelope. I believe both the filter and the amplitude envelope. So even though those parts are constantly playing the same notes, they are never playing them the same way. With the snare drum, you can see here, I've got some effects. I've got spiff and an EQ8 that only turn on during certain sections. I'm also automating the reverb send on the snare to be on and off in different sections. So let's hear what some of these differences sound like. It almost sounds like two completely different snares, but it's the exact same samples going through different processing. The kick, again, is doing the exact same thing in the verses as the choruses, but in the verses, I've got it turned down by 2 decibels. I've got the saturation a little bit lower than in the chorus. And in the chorus, I also turn on this Waves R-Bass plugin just to give it a bit more oomph. Here's the difference between those two. Verse kick, chorus kick. And then the other thing to keep things alive is ear candy. You can see I've got a whole bunch of parts here that just play like every once in a while. Most of their tracks are blank. So like we've got some risers. Some little tom fills. This thing in the chorus that I called Twinkle. And that's the kind of stuff you don't even consciously notice in the chorus, but if it weren't there, the atmosphere would just be a little drier. I hope you're seeing there's a lot of stuff you're gonna do in your songs that no one's gonna know is there except you. They won't know it on a mental level, but they will definitely feel it. Little chime part that only comes in once in a while. Here it's just playing one note.
Never gonna shake it.
So hopefully this inspired some strategies for you. There are really infinite possibilities when it comes to this stuff, but the important thing to remember is for most instruments and most genres, you want to avoid your parts being static. If this video was helpful for you, there's a ton of stuff like it in my online course. We go way longer, way deeper, harder, better, faster, stronger. The class walks you through finishing 3 tracks of your own in 30 days. It's an intensive process, but I think really worth it. If you have some time to put into it, I think you'll get a lot out of it. You can use any DAW. I do teach in Ableton, but I try to teach the principles so they're applicable in pretty much any music software. And that's really all you need to take the course, although it can be helpful to have a MIDI controller, maybe a microphone, headphones, just a few basics like that. But you can do it if you just have any DAW. There's frequently asked questions at learnmonthly.com/Andrew, so hopefully any question you might have about the course is answered there, but if it's not, you can email support@learnmonthly.com or like tweet me. I'll try to respond to all of those. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.
I don't wanna turn